P-Cell, Standard 4, Element E, the professional duty is clear regarding technology and teaching and learning. The standard states a school leader must promote the effective use of technology in the service of teaching and learning. An essential word in that text is effective. Thus, we must think about what constitutes effective use. Something to consider. Would having a master schedule for all students to Zoom with teachers meet the expectation of this standard? So, recognizing that this particular standard relates to school leaders, this is what you're charged to do. And an actionable thing that you are doing is creating this Zoom calendar where teachers are intentionally meeting with students at a certain time of the day, certain part of the week. Would the scheduled use of technology achieve the expectation of effective use of technology in the service of teaching and learning? Can a schedule alone guarantee effective use of technology? Well, quite simply, no. It's a great thing to do. Certainly, having an organizational pattern that's clear for both parties on when we are connecting. But whenever we're thinking about the true intent of this standard, that wouldn't be an example that aligns to effective use. The standard is not merely about using technology in the service of teaching and learning. It is about promoting effective use. So then we must question, what might effective use look like in practice? What might you see a principal doing to demonstrate attainment of this standard? Acknowledging the fact that our preparation programs and practical experience did not prepare us to lead virtual education during a worldwide pandemic. We all have a learning curve. There's nothing wrong with that. It's reality. Thus, learning and support is especially critical during our present reality. As such, we're excited to share a variety of video clips today that will hopefully support your leadership skills during this most unusual time. And as discussed, we have recognized and acknowledged that school leaders are responsible for ensuring effective use of technology. So, considering our present reality, this standard could not be more applicable. Thus, we want to examine it a bit further. We're fortunate to have a video clip that brings to life P-Cell Standard 4 Element E as we think about ways to grow and improve. This specific example was shared by Kentucky Principal Sean Holland from Allen County Intermediate Center. And Mr. Holland is part of an administrative digital leadership professional learning community. The clip is part of a teacher spotlight series that Mr. Holland uses as a professional learning support for his teachers in his own professional quest to promote effective use of technology in the service of teaching and learning. So, as we watch this clip, consider how this teacher spotlight video serves as evidence the principal can use to support P-Cell Standard 4 Element E. And as we watch it, I do want to give you a heads up that because it's an authentic and it's a real example of something that's going on within a school, it's not a professional piece, so the audio is a little low. So for this particular video, I would encourage you to turn up the audio so that you can hear all the ins and outs of the video clip.
I'm just going to talk a little bit today about how I have implemented Jamboard to help with RTI this school year. So back at the end of September, once all of our students had taken the STAR test, I had talked with Ms. Tabor about how we could still effectively serve those Tier 3 students with all of the safety guidelines and precautions that we're taking this year with the situation that we're in. So she had mentioned that Vicki Coleman in 4th grade had been using Jamboard in her Tier 1 lessons. So she thought that this would be something we could use possibly for Tier 3 instruction as well. So I have up here one of the activities that I did with the students, and I have inserted a picture of a worksheet onto Jamboard. Jamboard is just a Google extension that you can get from your Google Waffle. And if you come over here to the side, you can insert different images through a Google search. You can take a photo of a worksheet and save it to your drive and upload that from there. But this is where I got these worksheets that I'll be showing you that the students were working on today digitally. So on this first slide here on my Jamboard, I just did some modeling for the students. In our core content class, we were working on decimal place value in fifth grade math, and so I wanted to relate that to whole number place value. These tier 3 students that I was working with are on about a third grade math level, so I wanted to make it relatable to what we were doing in class, but take it back down a little bit for them to make sure that they understood that related to whole numbers as well. So we did some modeling here, and then on the next frame is where I let each of the students, I have two tier 3 students who are in a different home room than my own, and so I gave them their own workspace. And the way that we communicate while using Jamboard is we meet through Google Meet. And so each afternoon during our RTI time, those two students join in with me. We share the link to Jamboard, and they each have their own workspace. They can see what I'm working on the modeling page. They can do their own writing here. As you can see, there's a difference here between the writing of the two. I just want to let you know there is a learning curve with this. Since this
Okay, so we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. We apologize for that sudden stop on the video clip. However,
see the difference. So just know there's a learning curve there. That's
okay,
something you need to teach your students about um, whenever you're using this. So this has really helped. The students look forward to this. They ask me, this happens on Thursdays for me. They ask every Thursday, are we gonna, do Google Meet today? And I'll be like, yes, we're gonna log on at about 2:10. So type in the code and be ready to go. So they really look forward to this. And this has still helped me to be able to, service them and reach them still while doing it safely and being able to be in my classroom and them being theirs. I can see their work and I can still communicate with them face to face. So I think this is a great tool to use. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
all right, fantastic. Well, I'm glad we were able to restart that video clip. And in that particular example, once again, I want to emphasize that that was something that the principal has brought to the forefront as evidence for his professional standard of promoting the effective use of technology in the service of teaching and learning. So he was instrumental in working with the teacher to equip her with the information to share with other teachers within the school, and of course facilitated the structure so that that could happen. Now, thinking about that particular example, and going back to the standards intent, promoting that effective use, I want to share with you some examples from that video clip, some evidence pieces, some things that we saw, some things that we heard related to that standard. And there's lots of evidence pieces, but we're going to populate 3 pieces in a Zoom poll here. And as you glance at these 3 pieces of evidence, I'd just like for you to vote on which piece of evidence resonates most with you. Which piece do you feel like is the strongest in terms of connection between the standards intent? So looking at that, we'll see that populate. Here we go. I see it in progress. There's no right or wrong answer in this, just whichever one that you feel connects closely to that standard. Okay, so it looks like we've had a lot of people vote. People are still voting, but The second piece there seems to be generating the most responses, designated RTI time with identified students, and that purposeful communication between the teacher and student. So I'm just going to ask for one person in the group to share out why, if you select, well, first of all, if you selected that second piece, I'm going to ask you to share out why that you were drawn to that and why that you feel like that is a strong example of effective use. Why do you feel like that's strongly connected to that standard? And if you want to just unmute, feel free to do that, or in the chat box, you could type me and then we'll be able to see who wants to speak.
I think it's because the teacher is able to visually see what the student's doing and what's the process they're making to get their answers, and they're doing it digitally and able to still work with students like they're there.
Yeah. Okay. So really making that connection to what's going on within the regular classroom and following those same intentional structures and groupings and strategies and such. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So whenever we think about this whole purposeful focus on effective use of technology, especially when we're in this virtual world, I want to pose a question for you to consider as an administrator, because I think we can all agree that the principal that submitted that piece of evidence was certainly showcasing effective use of technology. It wasn't just let's all talk about what we're doing, but this particular teacher was really emphasizing the strategies, the actionable things that really resulted in positive student outcomes. And so that, of course, is connected to effective. So thinking about that and recognizing that we are charged with this duty as an administrator, I've got a question for you to consider. It's a reflection question. And I just maybe encourage you to write it down on a Post-it note, put it at your desk as a constant reminder about how you might be more intentional at promoting the effective use of technology. So just a question to consider. And as we progress throughout the remainder of the time today, hopefully you'll get some ideas. It'll spark your thinking a little bit more about how you might be able to do that. And hopefully you'll walk away with some strategies to ensure that intentionality at the promotion of effective use. So with that, going to just kind of transition to where we've been, especially whenever we're thinking about first semester of this school year in 2020. As we continue to focus on effective use of technology, we must acknowledge that this school year has been exceptionally challenging. We've all had to learn how to connect in a new way. As well, we've had to adjust to typical issues presented in a very, very different manner. It's certainly been a year that as a school leader, you probably have had to hold back tears while trying to give that reassuring smile to others. In fact, some people have even felt like this school year's been wasted. However, we know that is not the case. It's important to focus on what we've learned from 2020 that's certainly going to make us better and stronger, as a great deal of positive professional change has occurred. And an example of one such teacher who has really thrived during this trying time. She's actually grown in her practice to meet the specialized needs of a new instructional environment. Her name is Mrs. Moon. And during remote learning, she struggled with keeping her students engaged during that synchronous time. So she found a strategy on TikTok that's garnered her some great success. And so then she shared that strategy on Twitter, and her innovative professional change influenced many other teachers to grow professionally. Let's take a moment to look at how she tackled her issue of engagement for her students.
One moment.
Do you want me to get it, Jenny?
Yes, I am having some technical difficulties on my side. Thank you, Paul.
Times 2? Yes, who was that? Ishan. Yep, times 2. So we do the same thing here. Great. So we know how to multiply fractions. 2 over 3 times 2 is the same thing as times 2 over 1. What do we get? Somebody else? Hands up. Or just unmute yourself.
1 1/3.
Oh yeah, yes, 4 over 3, which is the same thing as 1 1/3. Sticker, okay. She went right to the mixed number. Great job.
Keep it up.
Yes, keep it up. All right. So,
Times 2?
yes, who was that?
Okay, so that particular strategy, lots of fun involved in that. We've got a teacher here who is putting stickers on her face every time a new student participates in answering a question. And you could even hear one of the students make a comment like 6 stickers, keep it up. So he was encouraging other students within the group there to volunteer and to be involved and to be engaged so that the teacher would continue putting the stickers on her face. So she's clearly doing whatever it takes to connect with her kids, and it worked. Her purpose was trying to increase engagement, and she did that. She reported increased levels of engagement, and her students were encouraging others to participate. So, success. Her success actually went viral, and many teachers followed her lead and reported positive student outcomes. So, without question, educators have risen to the occasion and used innovation to meet their students' virtual learning needs. Recognizing all of the amazing strategies and tools educators have developed out of necessity, that is where we want to focus our opening discussion time. We want to think about those positive changes that have occurred as a result of 2020. So, we've got a question for you to consider. As a result of 2020, what aspect of your practice has changed for the better? Why and how? We're going to give you an opportunity to have some conversation with a colleague around this. We're going to invite you to a breakout room in just a moment and do this turn and talk around the question. Now, I've got some procedures for you to keep in mind as you join your breakout room. When you get invited, of course, hit that join button. And once you arrive in your breakout room, the person whose name is first in the alphabet will begin. So you'll start off by greeting your partners and then take about a minute or so to share out what aspect of practice has changed for the better. Then allow time for the other partners to share out. And when time's up, we'll return whole group, and we'd love to hear from someone sharing out about these positive changes. So look for that breakout invitation right now, and we'll
If you haven't already done so, please look for the
short and sweet discussion. And I can tell by your faces that you are still wanting to talk. So that's a good thing. And you're going to find out why in just a few minutes. But we do want one person to share out large group and talk and share what the positives that you heard maybe from your colleagues or what you've experienced yourself personally. So in the chat, if you want to type me or just unmute, feel free.
I'll start. My name is Joyce Pace, and I'm sorry my camera is off. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty with the camera and the video this morning. I think one of the things that's helped knowing, the virtual and, what's going on in the classroom is our consistency of having the Schoology platform, and it being, you know, that I can look up, and when parents are having problems or issues, I can look up instantly and know what is being put on and pushed out to students. And I think that's been very powerful in my work with the parents on that side, is that I know at all times what's being pushed out.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Yeah, so I hear a lot of positives that are embedded in what you just shared. This notion of consistency, the communication with parents, having the knowledge and the access to be able to garner the information that parents are wanting. Certainly, we'd want to continue being able to do that as we transition maybe perhaps away from virtual learning in the fall. So great to hear some positives. And I know there were many more, but we wanted to get you thinking about that because our perception is so very important as we're thinking about continuing our work, continuing our goal of growing and improving. So transitioning though to the first session that we did with this framework for remote teaching. During part 1 of the series, we discussed the 8 components and stages the Danielson Group identified. So let's go back to stage 3 for some additional review. In stage 3, engaging students in learning, there are 3 distinct components that are identified, 1E, 3B, and 3C. And while we understand the expectation of these components in a face-to-face environment, what professional enhancements are needed to be successful in a remote environment? Let's examine 3B, the second element, discussion techniques. Discussion in a virtual setting will require educators to structure things differently. We're going to engage in some learning today to help support us in thinking about what we might do to effectively support teachers to structure remote discussion. And we're fortunate to have a video clip of a teacher using a discussion strategy of turn and talk virtually. As well, in this particular clip that we're going to watch, we've got some powerful commentary being provided by Doug Lemov, author of Teach Like a Champion, and it brings to life the attributes of highly effective remote discussion. And without question, learning from others is a wonderful professional strategy. So gratitude is extended to this teacher, whose name is Ben Esser, for his willingness to share his classroom with us as a tool to support our professional growth. This is an 8-minute clip, and it shows the application of a synchronous discussion strategy, turn and talk. Once again, pay particular attention to the commentary. I think you'll get a lot from Doug Lemov's comments that help us understand what highly effective discussion should look like in a virtual setting.
And I'll show you the first couple seconds of it again, just because a lot of the interesting things that Ben does at the beginning. He's got all of his students. You'll see them there in gallery view. He sends them off to a turn and talk. They've written in response to a question about the novel they've read before they go to the turn and talk. And it's just interesting to think about how that might influence a turn and talk, right? He asked them all to write for a moment, pencil to paper. And so they thought deeply about this question. And that means that the minute they get into the turn and talk, they've got something to say. And so the potential for awkwardness and not focusedness, or I'm not really sure what to say, is immediately, he's reduced the likelihood of that. So here's Ben in action.
This is going to be a shorter turn and talk. We're going to come back together in about 1 minute. Same thing. Please let the person whose name comes first in the alphabet go first. I'll take a couple hands here for people who want to close this out, and the connections they saw between the first interaction between Regan and Isabel and what happened there at the end. Brandon, can you share your answer, bud?
In their first meeting, when Regan said he promised, it foreshadows the line later when he said, "You must return with your mistress." These lines connect because there's opposite ideas presented. Regan said he was going to try his best to get Isabel and Ruth out of their chaos, but Regan went with society and made Isabel go back to Madam, so he broke her promise.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a broken promise. Soraya Ramos, build on Brandon's idea where he's saying he went with society.
So, in their first meeting, when Regan says, "I shall do it to my power," he promised, it foreshadows the line later when he says, "The law binds my hands and my actions."
Great, and so I'll pause there. And feel free, a couple of you have started doing this, but feel free to chat away. Things that you see that you notice that Ben did there and that you liked in his application of Turn and Talk. There are a lot of interesting things that he does really well. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to cue up the video so I can show you the first couple seconds of it again.
That was lovely, and a lot was happening there, and it was soft and effective.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at some of the comments coming in. People noticing the way he set up an order for taking turns. We love that idea. It's so important that, some kids are more verbal than others. It's really nice if we can balance things so some of the quieter kids get to talk first and maybe some of the more talkative kids get to listen a little bit more. And I love Monica noting that there's a culture already built, and it's lovely. He's really made this a routine that kids are familiar with. And Jill just calling out that phrase, "Can you build on?" I think that what we want here is a discussion, a peer-to-peer discussion. And so the fact that after the Turn and Talk, he takes the screen down and they're looking at each other, and he's really socializing them to listen as carefully as they talk. Yeah, great observations about just students citing the text. And a really small thing here, Julie pointing out that they have 1 minute. It's a time limit, and it's a short time limit. And I think that's really interesting and worth reflecting on, because one of the things that can go wrong in a Turn and Talk is it goes on way too long, and kids then get kind of they're done talking about what you sent them off to talk about, and then it's awkward for them, or they're talking about non-productive things and they practice being non-productive in Turn and Talks, and then they come back and you want to go to discussion, and instead of getting a lively discussion that Ben gets, you get crickets because the kids have already said everything they can think of on the topic. So one of our favorite things to do with a Turn Talk is to keep it a little bit too short as opposed to a little bit too long. So when kids come back from a Turn and Talk and they're still talking and they're trying to get in one last point, that's a really good sign. It means you didn't quite give them enough time, and that means that they're dying to talk in the larger group. I think that a couple of really interesting observations from the chat. So thanks for making those. Maybe I was going to show you the beginning of the video again, but I think we can just kind of talk through what some of the key things there are.
So one of the questions that Crystal asked was about students cringing about breakout rooms, and she was asking whether that is different at different grade levels. But I think you actually answered the question here, talking about making them an appropriate length of time. Bring people back while they still want to have a conversation and discuss.
I always think of a Turn and Talk as a preliminary activity, right? Its purpose is to warm people up for something that comes after it, which is usually a whole group discussion, right? So I want it to be short. I want to give people time to rehearse their thoughts and trial ideas. And that's short, right? You can do that in a very quick amount of time. And it's a little bit easier to have accountability that way. I think something else that Ben does really subtly here is a couple of people talked about how there's a familiar routine here. And I think that having a familiar routine makes it less awkward for kids. And so he says, the person whose name begins first in the alphabet start the conversation, right? One of the reasons that people might not like Turn and Talks is because you get there and it's awkward and you're kind of doing this dance of like, who's going to talk first and are we really going to talk about this thing? And so if you can script the routine for kids a little bit, makes it easier. And so one of the things I think that Ben did before this is he said something like, when you get to your Turn and Talk, greet your partner and ask them what they thought. So it should sound like this: "Hi, Hillary, how are you? What do you think?" Right? And just by doing that, I'm teaching them how to engage productively in a Turn and Talk. And one of the benefits of that is it's not awkward. And one of the benefits of that is they then don't dislike it. One other tiny thing that we think, I noticed a couple of people in the chat talking about they use Teams or some other platform where Turn and Talks are hard, or there isn't breakout room functionality. And in one of the webinars that we've done with our team, a colleague shared this idea that's up on the screen right now, which is sidebar buddies. And it's sort of a simulated version. I think it's up on the screen right now. Perhaps it's not on the screen. There we go. Now it's on your screen. Sidebar buddies is the idea that you pair kids up for the equivalent of a turn and talk in the chat. And so today's sidebar buddies are, as you can see over here on my screen, Shanice and David, Pablo and Carla, DeAndre and Jonathan. And what that means is when I say go, Shanice and David chat one-on-one to each other. Pablo and Carla chat to one another. And so it's not actually a breakout room. It's more like a one-on-one chat. And I think that's a really, really interesting idea. One last thing before I pass to Hillary to show her video is that the accountability challenge is important in turn and talks, whether in the classroom or online. We want to make sure that kids are using their time productively. And so you can see there's one strategy here that Ben uses. He just drops in on the turn and talks. But two other things that I think are worth thinking about is you can turn your turn and talk into a turn and task, which is to give kids a clear deliverable when they come out of the turn and talk. I'll give you a problem to solve it together. And when you come out of the turn and talk, I'll ask you what your solution, I'll cold call some of you and ask you what your solution was, or I'll ask you to enter into the chat what your solution was, or I'll call on you to share your solution. And now I sort of know very clearly what I'm accountable for. And the other thing, this is really simple, but the reason that people are often off task in turn and talks, and I know this from being an adult who's sometimes off task in turn and talks, is that I forget what the question is. And it's really easy to do that with the best of intentions. And so chatting to everyone before you start the turn and talk, here is what the question is, or messaging them while they're in the turn and talk, here's what the question is, can help to make sure that they are productive. All right, so that.
Okay, so lots of information being shared there by Doug Lamov that's hopefully pushed your thinking, as well as watching that video clip where we saw Turn and Talk in action. So what we're going to do is actually take his advice on the use of sidebar partners, and we're going to engage in a sidebar conversation. Everyone has been assigned a number, so whenever you see your name there in the participants list, you see a number in front of it. And on the slide, you can see, like if you're 17, then you're going to be having a sidebar conversation in chat with the person who is labeled number 18. And the conversation should be around what pushed your thinking from the synchronous classroom clip and commentary. So if you'll open up the chat right now, and when you go to 2, it's probably going to automatically say everyone. Just use that drop down and find the person that you are assigned to have a sidebar conversation with and engage in a couple of minutes here of chat back and forth regarding what pushed your thinking from the synchronous classroom clip and commentary. So just a couple of minutes of quiet time for you to chat back and forth with your partners. Here to finish up your last chat back and forth with your partner. Okay, time is up. So love to hear from someone in the group regarding maybe something you heard from your colleague or something personally that pushed your thinking as you watched that synchronous clip and then listen to the commentary.
I'll share. My partner was Terry Stice, and so I'll actually kind of combine both of our thoughts. Is, what the pandemic has revealed for us is high expectations teaching that can be done concurrently with building relationships. And the tragedy that we've seen is sometimes right out of the gate, we didn't necessarily provide this for our students, especially as the students got older. And what I noticed is a trend of cameras have gone off, teaching went to compliance teaching, and then students intelligently called our bluff.
Mhm. Thank you. All right, anyone else want to share out something that pushed your thinking or gave you an aha? Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you found that particular activity productive in a new way. I guess maybe you could think about connecting your kids where you don't have to use like a virtual breakout space. We all have chat no matter what the platform is. So hopefully you found some value in that. Thinking about what we watched though with Mr. Esser, without a doubt, he exhibited a great degree of intentionality and purposefulness in that short video clip. There were certainly intentional professional decisions made whenever he structured that time when he had the students together. And as a result, his synchronous teaching time was quite effective. This leads us to examine our degree of intentionality, especially when it comes to using synchronous and asynchronous settings. So let's review that guidance just a bit. And this is information that we dug deeply into during part 1 of this professional learning series, but just quickly reviewing. You'll notice here in this additional strategy section, this is a screenshot pulled from the Danielson resource, and they are providing strategies, ideas around synchronous engagement and asynchronous engagement for all of the components that they pulled out to focus upon. Now, thinking about synchronous and asynchronous, there are distinct purposes for each, and there are distinct reasons why we should use one versus the other. And that's very important as school leaders that we understand that so that we can provide the coaching necessary to our teachers to be intentional and purposeful and certainly using the right type of engagement strategy depending on our outcome, depending on our purpose. So if you'll notice on the right side of this slide in the yellow box, we've got a definition of what synchronous is. We've also identified those key advantages of using synchronous. And then we've got a bulleted list here that gives us some suggestions for ideal prime time use of synchronous. Also, on the middle of this slide, you're going to see a question pop up in a blue box, and this is a question that we must always consider after or even before we're thinking about scheduling a synchronous time with our students. Reflection. Maybe after the fact, you've pulled students together, you've got that schedule in place, and we know that we're meeting Wednesday from 9 to 10 with all of the students in a synchronous setting. So after the fact, a question a teacher should always be asking is, could this video chat have been a recorded video instead? And if the answer is yes, then a pre-recorded video is a better option. So really think about the value. What occurred during this time that we were all together in this synchronous environment? If the video or if the time could have been a recorded video, then we would want to use a pre-recorded video because there's a lot of power in that. There's a great deal of power in asynchronous. So let's talk a little bit about that. On the right side again, we've got that common understanding of what asynchronous is. It's teacher and student interactions occur at different times, but the thing in there is interactions are happening. It's just in a different time. Many advantages to asynchronous, and you can see there with the provided list. And then we've got some guidance regarding when to use it. When is it most appropriate? So as you look at that bulleted list, the last one there is where we're going to focus a little bit of time. That's greater student agency. With asynchronous, students are really given the opportunity to own their learning. So this notion of greater student agency, what might that look like? What might it sound like? And as a school leader, how can you support and promote student agency, recognizing that it is a best practice, especially when we're talking asynchronous? On this slide, there are some look-fors when it comes to student agency. As an administrator, you understand the importance of it, but what might you see or hear Let's say you're doing a virtual classroom observation. What might you see or hear that indicates student agency is prioritized? There are, in fact, dozens of ways to encourage students to exert agency. And this slide shows you a few examples of how it might sound. So let's take a moment to silently review. Just read through those stars there, just pushing on your thinking so that you can kind of conceptualize what it might sound like. Okay, so with these examples in mind, let's explore student agency a bit further. We are going to watch a very short video clip of a teacher, and let me just give you a heads up. I asked you earlier to turn your volume up. For this clip, you need to turn it down because it's got really great volume. So turn your audio down just a bit. And as we watch it, it's an asynchronous clip. I want you to be very focused on what evidence of student agency did you see or hear in this particular clip.
Finding
Like I
this a
said,
little bit tricky.
very short, but lots of evidence in there that connects to student agency. So be aware, be alert, because we're going to share out the examples.
So today's lesson is on problem solving with ratios. And again, if you're finding this a little bit tricky, then have a look at our level 2 lesson with Mr. Harmer. It just goes into a bit more detail. Okay, so before we start with the main bulk of the learning, we're going to do some really important retrieval practice of those key skills that we need to unlock the learning for today. So if you're having a look at these 2 questions here, splitting ratios, and you can't remember how to do it, or you're not 100% sure, stop the video now and watch that level 2 video. If you're feeling confident, get this written down, retrieval practice underlined, numbers 1 to 5, and get ready for our retrieval practice quiz.
So in the chat, everyone, if you don't mind, just go ahead and open up that chat and type in some evidence that you heard that indicated student agency was prioritized for this teacher. In the chat. What were some phrases? And Eve, I'm going to ask you to share a couple, please.
Yes, scaffolding for different levels of learning. If you feel confident, move on. That was definitely student agency. Opportunity to go back and rewatch or relearn. Definitely, that was one. Stop the video now. That's an opportunity for students to do that. So if you feel confident, get the examples written down and get ready for the practice quiz was another one. They could choose whether they were ready to move on or if they needed additional support. Stop the video now. Lots of different examples in the chat, Stacy, so everyone can read those. So I think everyone's getting the idea of where the students are getting some choice and how you can provide that through the video clips. Thanks. Back to you.
Thank you. All right. So as a school leader, as an administrator, as someone who's providing feedback to teachers, are you seeing examples of student agency? Is that something that's prioritized? Recognizing that asynchronous should incorporate student agency. Are you seeing it? Are you hearing it? Just something for you to consider. Now, transitioning. Just as student agency is important, making connections to the regular classroom is as well. Even though the setting is different, it's important that students can clearly connect expectations and actions that are present in the face-to-face environment to the remote setting. Connections such as that support a safe environment for students and builds a level of comfort that aids in student success. It supports really what we heard Jana talk about was the need for relationships, the connections, the feeling of safe, secure. And as we focus on this idea, we're going to reference it as echoes of the classroom. And that's just a phrase that was pulled out from the video series on the teaching channel where we had shared with you at the start of this session. But they use this phrase, echoes of the classroom. So we want to notice some of the ways that we could possibly make students feel like they are in the regular classroom setting. Number one, interacting through familiar systems, making sure that teachers are utilizing the same types of structures, systems, routines, so that students are very familiar with it, they're comfortable with it. It's in a different setting, but they're used to it. This idea of maintaining continuity with the classroom, using consistent verbal and nonverbal clues, and then ending with this idea of creating a feeling of normalcy, hearing phrases like, just like we've always done, just indicating that you're used to this as students, as members of this class, we are familiar with this, doing it in a different setting, but it's something that you know and understand already. Now, this notion of echoes of the classroom is something you're going to really see, I think, in this clip that we're sharing with you next. It's an asynchronous example, and it's 7 minutes in length, and it's actually been identified as a really strong example of asynchronous instruction for a variety of reasons, not just because it's got elements of echoes of the classroom, but other attributes make it quite strong as well. As we watch this clip, the same is going to hold true. We have commentary by Doug Lamov, and we'll see the video clip, and then we're going to ask you to think afterward about the clip and commentary and what were your ahas regarding it.
Different perspectives that we can enrich the experience by sharing in chat.
Great. Here we go.
Hello. Welcome back. Day 2 of Math Stories. If you're excited, give me a big thumbs up.
Can I just point out a couple of things right away? So she's leading into the camera. It feels, Dan Willingham has this great post about where he says, one of the reasons why Zoom is so exhausting is because you only see people from the shoulders up. This is the first time, and one of the only times when we saw a teacher stand up when she was on camera, and it brings her to life in a way that it's almost hard to describe. Suddenly you see all the sort of body language that you get when you're in a classroom is suddenly brought to life just by the fact that she is not sitting at her desk, that she's standing up while she tapes this. And then you can see in the background, right, she's got her anchor chart with the problem written on it. She's going to walk back to it in a minute. It looks, this is a shot in her apartment in Brooklyn, but it looks and feels somehow psychologically like the classroom. It's familiar.
Great. I'm excited that I'm here with all of you. We're ready to go for day 2. Okay. So today the story problem has a question about paper clips. And here I go. There's one quick challenge at the end of this video, so when you watch the rest of the video, you'll find out what it is. Okay. All right, here we go. Day 2. I had 28 paper clips in the box. That's a lot of paper clips. I used 15 of them. How many paper clips do I have left in the box? Okay, now it's your turn to figure out what your number sentence would be. I'm going to quickly mark up this story problem like we did yesterday together, just a little bit faster. If you want to challenge, go ahead and pause right now and think about what are the numbers and the values that I would circle? What are the units that I would underline?
I love that phrase. If you want to challenge, go ahead and press pause now, because it underscores for students that they have agency over video, even in asynchronous video. Kids watch thousands and thousands of videos online, but they watch them passively. And here she's sending this message is like, you control this. You can do challenging things. You can pause and do the work. You can roll back and watch something again. And it actually reminds us of teachers that there are things that we can do that can emphasize agency. We can say things like, I'm going to explain this again. If you feel like you're ready to go and you don't need the explanation, you can jump ahead till 5 minutes. If you feel like you need one more review, stick around and I'll do this here now. And so we can actually let students exercise a little bit more ownership of the learning process sometimes when we're working asynchronously like this. And she does a beautiful job of that here. I'll just show you a couple more seconds of this.
Okay. Great. So let's mark up together. When I mark up a story problem, I have to first circle my numbers, underline my units.
just want to remind you, like, underline my unit. She's sitting alone in her living room as she does that, right? She's made this leap of faith that I'm gonna meet kids halfway and pretend like I'm in a classroom and make it feel like we're together. I think that's profound for her. I feel it as an adult, but certainly for a first grader. I mean, kids they're unlikely to show more enthusiasm for a lesson than we show ourselves. And I think I'm sure that it's awkward to be sitting at your kitchen table with your cats watching you, pretending that your laptop is a room full of first graders, but boy, does it make a difference when you're on the receiving end and you feel that, you feel that human interaction. I'll just let her wrap up for a couple seconds here.
And I'm going to bracket the question. So let's do that right now. Here, I know that I'm beginning with 28 paper clips in my box. I'm using 15 of them.
All right, I'll pause it here, but I want to go back to your point, Wendy, about there is no technology needed for this. This is about online learning is like bricks and mortar classroom mostly, in that it boils down to very human tools about connecting with people and carefully designing instruction and making an engaging question well presented with humanity, and a little bit of a little bit of loving accountability mixed in. And I think it's doable. It doesn't require bells and whistles.
Yeah, she's not using an annotation tool on a slide. She's not having to apologize while she gets something moved in between browser windows, things like that. That is really lovely.
Can I just say one thing? Because what you said is really interesting. Working memory is such a powerful thing to consider in education, especially for teachers. If your working memory is used up, working memory is defined as like all the things that you're conscious of thinking of. If your working memory is used up trying to toggle between 6 different screens and do your screen share and manage the chat, slow it down for yourself. Simplify until you get the technology right, because you can't listen to what your students are saying or read what they're writing if all of your working memory is focused on technology. So, when in doubt, simplify it and focus on, quality task, deeply human interaction. Like, that is the soul of learning.
Yeah, and the same goes for our students. If we're asking them to move back and forth between things and navigate all of their technology, the cognitive load on them means that there's a little less of their resource to apply to the content that we're asking them to focus on. The differentiation that was offered, saying if you want to fast forward, you're suggesting there using pause for agency. I did have a thought. If you're at 1 minute 30 in your timing, you might not know that at 5 minutes the students would stop, because you may not know how long it's going to take you to explain something coming up. I was going to suggest to teachers that they say, I'm going to go ahead and explain XYZ. When you see me hold up the textbook and wave it, that's where you want to pause the video and rejoin the conversation, or something like that.
Or you could just take your 20-minute asynchronous lesson and chop it up into little 5-minute blocks. Well, kids can take a tiny break before they watch the next one. You can just go to the next one. I'll be explaining this again. If you feel like you're ready for part 2, go ahead and start the second video. Would be another way to hack that with a really simple, without much technology.
End the clip at the end of the explanation so that students can pick up with the next one. Okay, I just wanted to offer some suggestions, because I thought, well, gosh, if someone's in the middle of recording something and they want to try that, they may need to think about the logistics, and that would be a no stress way to do it. But the clips are even better, then you can use them interchangeably.
All right, so lots of things to consider. As we consider what we watched in terms of that classroom visit and the commentary that we heard, I want to ask the group to keep it simple. I want to ask you to pick up a pen, a pencil, some type of writing instrument, and physically respond to this question. What pushed your thinking from that asynchronous classroom clip and commentary? So, going to give you 1 minute of time to process that question. And once again, asking you to keep it simple, using some type of writing instrument. Just write out your response to this particular question. All right, 10 seconds to finish up your thinking. All right, we'd love to hear from one person in the group regarding what sparked your thinking as you watch that asynchronous classroom clip and listen to the commentary. Just feel free to unmute one person.
Hey, I'll share. I thought it was interesting how they mentioned just her simply standing up so that the kids had a sense of being in the actual classroom was something that was so simple and small, but could really truly make a difference. I know a lot of teachers just naturally sit, at their desk or a table or whatnot, but maybe just standing up and doing it on a board would give the kids a sense of being in the classroom, even though they're not.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. And I need to stand up from time to time myself. I think that's a good strategy. Thank you for sharing, Natalie. All right. So lots of things, I'm sure, that we could identify that really prompted us to think about what steps we could take to enhance the virtual learning opportunities for our students. We're going to continue with this and look at a synchronous clip and want you once again to pay attention to the things that we've already pulled out as kind of look fors. This idea of echoes of the classroom. Just like we heard from Natalie, standing up is so big in terms of connecting to familiarity. Students are used to seeing their teachers up in front of the classroom, standing up. That visibility there is important. As we watch this clip, what are some other examples of echoes of the classroom? What do you notice as you watch the clip? What really stands out to you? What resonates? And then what do you like? So as you watch it, what would be those positive things that you can connect to this video clip?
Please open up your class novel, whether you have the PDF or you have the hard copy. Thank you so much, Caleb, for putting your name, date, and advisory on this. Please open your book to page 153 or page 61. What page, Carlos?
61.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jasmine, can you unmute yourself, please, and read our reading focus?
Reading focus. As we read the conclusion of Las Galeras Esperanza Rising, Chapter 8, we will focus on characterization of Esperanza.
Thank you so much. And so as we remember what we've been talking about with Esperanza, 2 chapters ago, you all have said that she is becoming a dynamic character. How is she becoming a dynamic character? A character who is changing. Please take 1 minute and write it in the comments.
Mama's arm was burned. Her cheeks were flushed red, and she wasn't walking. Wakey. Esperanza felt panic squeezing her, and she screamed, "Hortensia!"
Great. Sound like you're screaming.
Hortensia!
Good. Really nice job, Ishmael. Thank you so much. All right, let's go ahead and pause right there. Answer question 1A and 1B. Only do the STAR questions if that's what you're doing. 1A and 1B. You have 3 minutes. Josiah's already done. Love your urgency, Josiah. All right, so this is what you're going to do. If you normally are in small group, you must stay. If you are coming to Friday intervention, you also must stay. Jaylon, please also stay on. The following people are currently allowed to leave if they choose to log. All right, we are now going to independent work. I'm sending people to breakout rooms. You're working with myself or you're working with Miss Anderson. This is a paragraph. I'm going to share my screen before I send you to breakout rooms. This is a paragraph response. What's going to happen is you're continuing to work independently, just like normal class, where I would be walking around checking people's work. pretend I'm walking around checking off your work. I'm logging through everyone's work to see where we all are. The class is over in 22 minutes. You should be able to finish this in 10, and then you'll have some free time before math starts. Don't forget to restate that question. Oh, I see you doing that. Nice job taking that feedback.
So I prefaced that video clip with some guidance, some look-fors around evidence that related to evident echoes of the classroom, pushed you to think about what you noticed and what you liked. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes in a breakout room to have some conversation regarding these 3 bullets. We'll use the same procedure we did the first time. The person whose name starts first in the alphabet will start us off whenever we join the breakout room. So look for that invitation and we'll be in there for a couple of minutes. Back. If we could just see participants, because I'd love to hear from one person regarding the conversation in that breakout room. Just unmute and volunteer. What did you notice? What did you like? What examples of echoes of the classroom? Volunteer. And we were just bragging on this group about how awesome you were volunteering to share out.
Well, Stacy, we were just talking about, if you didn't know that this was being conducted on Zoom and you were just listening to it, you wouldn't know that this was virtual. There were the routines, there was the specificity, short, quick, bursts and keeping, students moving forward. And so I just thought it was there was a lot of familiarity I felt for the students. And then the one thing that, we talked about was just noticing that they all had their cameras on, which has been a huge struggle because we don't require them. And there's a lot of sensitivity around that. I just thought it was, I just wonder, if how that was cultivated, and I thought that was impressive.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for those insights. And we could probably talk a lot longer about that video clip because we could address the planning that had to go into that structure. We could certainly identify a lot of other things we even like, but thinking of where we are in time, we're going to transition now because we've got a closing question for you. It's called a walkaway question, something for you to keep thinking upon, mull this over. As a result of today's session, as a school leader, what positive change might you make to enhance remote teaching? So we've seen a lot of examples and we've heard a lot of great insights regarding some next steps that we could possibly implement to take it to the next level. Going back to our guiding question, it's all about enhancing. So what is the positive change that you might make to enhance remote teaching? So a question to take away with you. And this could be one of those that you even write down on your desk on the Post-it note, have it there visible as a constant reminder. Now, just wanted to give you a heads up, something very new. Nobody else in the state knows about it just yet, but we are going to offer a part 3. It's the closing episode of this professional learning series around the framework for remote teaching. And we'll be sharing out information. I'm sure we can send that out to Greg, and then that information will be shared. But I'm going to turn it back over. I think at this point, got some information regarding, I think, the ELA certificate.
Thank you, Stacy, and thanks to all of you that have participated today. I'm going to drop a Google link into the chat, and it's just a very short Google form. And once you complete that, you'll be emailed a certificate of participation that will include an hour of ELA for your participation today. So I thank you for sharing and being open to tell us what your thoughts are. And so I look forward to part 3. I'm excited to hear that. I didn't know about that myself, so I'm excited about that. And we will make sure that you know about that or possibly can offer it once again here for you all. So that's all I have today. If you need anything else, you know to reach out to us here at GREC, Kelly.Thompson with an IE, remember at grec.org. Just reach out and let us know how we can better support you. And I just want to thank Stacy, Paul, Eve, Jenny, thank you for your time and for spending it with the GREC region today. So do you all have anything else that you want to say before we end?
Just thank you. Thanks for participation today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, so as soon as you have that Google form, you can hop off and enjoy the rest of your day. I think the sun's still shining for a little while, so hopefully you can look out the window and at least enjoy it a little bit. So see you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.